Finally, there is a great tradition of warnings in presidential farewells, and I've got one that's been on my mind for some time. But oddly enough, it starts with one of the things I'm proudest of in the past 8 years, the resurgence of national pride that I called the new patriotism. This national feeling is good, but it won't count for much, and it won't last unless it's grounded in thoughtfulness and knowledge. An informed patriotism is what we want. And are we doing a good enough job teaching our children what America is and what she represents in the long history of the world? Those of us who are over 35 or so years of age grew up in a different America. We were taught very directly what it means to be an American. And we absorbed almost in the air a love of country and an appreciation of its institutions. If you didn't get these things from your family, you got them from the neighborhood, from the father down the street who fought in Korea, or the family who lost someone at Anzio. Or you could get a sense of patriotism from school. And if all else failed, you could get a sense of patriotism from the popular culture. The movies celebrated democratic values and implicitly reinforced the idea that America was special. TV was like that too, through the mid-60s. But now we're about to enter the 90s, and some things have changed. Younger parents aren't sure that an unambivalent appreciation of America is the right thing to teach modern children. And as for those who create the popular culture, well-grounded patriotism is no longer the style. Our spirit is back, but we haven't re-institutionalized it. We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, and freedom is special and rare. It's fragile. It needs production. So we've got to teach history based not on what's in fashion, but what's important. Why the Pilgrims came here, who Jimmy Doolittle was, and what those 30 seconds over Tokyo meant. You know, 4 years ago, on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, I read a letter from a young woman writing to her late father, who had fought on Omaha Beach. Her name was Lisa Zanata Hen, and she said, "We will always remember. We will never forget what the boys of Normandy did." Well, let's help her keep her word. If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that could result ultimately in an erosion of the American spirit. Let's start with some basics. More attention to American history and a greater emphasis on civic ritual. And let me offer lesson number 1 about America. All great change in America begins at the dinner table. So tomorrow night in the kitchen, I hope the talking begins. And children, if your parents haven't been teaching you what it means to be an American, let them know and nail them on it. That would be a very American thing to do. And that's about all I have to say tonight, except for one thing. The past few days when I've been at that window upstairs, I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. The phrase comes from John Winthrop, who wrote it to describe the America he imagined. What he imagined was important because he was an early pilgrim, an early freedom man. He journeyed here on what today we'd call a little wooden boat. And like the other pilgrims, he was looking for a home that would be free. I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it and see it still. And how stands the city on this winter night? More prosperous, more secure, and happier than it was 8 years ago. But more than that, after 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true on the granite ridge, and her glow is held steady no matter what storm. And she's still a beacon, still a magnet for all who must have freedom, for all the pilgrims from all the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home. We've done our part, and as I walk off into the city streets, a final word to the men and women of the Reagan Revolution, the men and women across America who for 8 years did the work that brought America back. My friends, we did it. We weren't just marking time, we made a difference. We made the city stronger, we made the city freer, and we left her in good hands. All in all, not bad. Not bad at all.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me today. That was, of course, Ronald Reagan in his farewell address. And, just my first thought was, neither doth a man light a candle and hide it under a bushel, but put it on a candlestick, and it gives light to the whole house. The U.S. of Reagan years has become something very much different today. However, I want to just kind of say something here. Nothing would please our enemies more than for us to lose the desire to be proud of our country. And make no mistake, America is a great country. It may have some leaders that are really problematic, but in the end, the country itself, the country that sent men to the moon, the country that helped with the D-Day landings, the country that rose up from Pearl Harbor, the country that stood through the 9/11 attacks. This country is one that is great. And that is not a political statement, in my opinion. That is how I feel about America. I wish that we had leaders that still had the power of purpose and the strength of their love of America to make the hard decisions that will make America into that shining city on a hill. And that's just my thoughts real fast. I wanted to kind of share that with you. Tony, thank you very much for joining me. Glad to have you here, and I appreciate you being here. Hi, Ozzy. Glad to have you as well. Yes, it could be, again, the arsenal of democracy and the city on the hill. And the thing is that we have to, it's going to require effort from all of us. And that's going to include some people who aren't in America right now, too. Now, I do want to say one other thing, and that is that patriotism, if you are in a country that you love, make sure that your children know that you love your country and the freedoms that it provides. That's not just America. There are other countries with great freedoms as well, and you may be in one of them. Or you may be fighting against those who have suppressed those freedoms. Either way, make sure that your children and your family know just how much your country means to you. And so you can have that pride of purpose, that future look, that looking towards that city on a hill. Anyway, that's enough of me pontificating over here. I do appreciate you all joining me today. And of course, chime in. Let me know you're here. Robbie, I see you there. Thank you very much. Glad to have all three of you here so far. So chime in. Let me know if you're here. And also feel free to ask any questions. We'll see if we can research them on the fly. We're going to start off today with this document from the Institute for the Study of War. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I'm going to summarize the takeaway here. The Russian strategy that matters most is not Moscow's war-fighting capability or strategy, but rather the Kremlin strategy to cause us to see the world as the Kremlin wishes us to see it, and make decisions in that Kremlin-generated alternative reality that will allow Russia to win in the real world. The West cannot be defeated by arms. Make no mistake. We, as the West, cannot be defeated by strength of arms. We can be defeated by strength of mind. And if they can run down our will and prevent us from wanting to help each other and hold each other up, then they will have defeated the U.S., not, again, with force of arms, but with the force of the mind, with the force of persuasion and disinformation. And that's where Russia's strategy truly lies. They want us to see America as corrupt, incapable, divided, unable to respond, and a weakened, divided, falling world power. The Russians want us to see France as rife with social issues, with a president that is not a positive force. They want us to see the UK as not being a provider of assistance and help to Ukraine, and as a great nation in its own right. They want us to see them as being weak and incapable. This is their plan. Divide, conquer. Because once we have been divided and once our will has been destroyed, then we are easy to conquer because we are weak and incapable. That's why I say we must not be. In fact, on that note, I was going to save this for later, but I'm going to share it right now. What's coming up is a video from Grant Shapps. He was having a meeting with a parliament committee. I don't remember which one. It had a whole bunch of former ministers of defense in it. And I think that what he says is valuable and insightful. Let's go ahead and pull that up right now.
I just wanted to make one small point, only because with 6 former MOD ministers and lots of professional expertise here, this is taken as a given within this room. But for people watching and hearing that the UK isn't ready for war exclusively with Russia, it's important to understand that because we're in NATO and Article 5 exists, that we would never be in that situation. And in fact, if we were in a war against Russia, NATO has 4 times as many tanks, 3 times as many subs, 4 times as many helicopters, 6 times as many armoured vehicles, 4.5 times as many warships, 8 times as many transport aircraft, 4 times as many artillery and fires, 16 times the aircraft carriers, and 3 times as many fighters. In other words, we would be in a very strong position.
That was Grant Shapps there, UK's Minister of Defence. That puts it into perspective. Together, again, we cannot be defeated by force of arms. That's why they want to destroy our unity. Or as Anton Herashchenko states, the outcome of the war in Ukraine will determine how the geopolitical map of the world will look in the coming decades. If Ukraine wins and international law is restored, the world will be able to live in accordance with democratic values. If Ukraine loses its statehood, Russia will become a hegemon in Europe, and the United States and China will divide zones of influence. If the war becomes protracted and lasts for many years, both the West and Russia will be exhausted, and the world will become bipolar, with the United States and China dividing zones of influence. Democratic and civilized countries, which we call the West, have a direct interest in Ukraine's quick victory because it means a stable and peaceful life for them as well. Okay, so I may have just prevaricated a bit there in saying that I was done lecturing and all that kind of, pontificating for a bit there. But I think that overall, I think we as a nation and as the West and as a whole need to make sure we're looking at our real power. But let's go ahead and move on to some of the things going on. There's not a whole lot of Ukraine news right now. There's a few odds and ends. But the big news was, what does a commander-in-chief of a nation at war really do? Well, we here have President Zelensky arriving in the Sumy region, visiting with soldiers, wounded soldiers, and men in the hospital, and visiting a command post there. He even visited some of the newly built fortifications in the Sumy area. Now, I understand Sumy is right on the border there, so they are pretty much under the gun constantly from Russia. He even talked about his whole visit today, and I'll just kind of read this through real quick here. Today we are in Sumy region. I've been here with the team all day. First, our military. I've visited our guys who are recovering from injuries and honored them with state awards. I am immensely grateful to the doctors, nurses, and everyone who helps them recover from their injuries. The second issue for today is, of course, everything related to the defense of Sumy region. Each community, each city, it is especially difficult in the border area, which is subject to constant Russian terror. There is constant shelling, airstrikes, and countering enemy subversive groups. I am grateful to all the soldiers, all the commanders of the armed forces, the border guards, our police, the National Guard, the security service of Ukraine, everyone who is involved in the defense. Ukraine knows how to be strong. Every day we have to add to the confidence of our country and people. And please always be grateful to those who preserve normal life in our country, in all our communities. This is a man who is leading his country. He goes to the front lines. I know I'm not going to fanboy all over, get all fangirly on it. I'm just pointing out that if you were a nation at war, where would you prefer to see your president at? He even spent a little bit of time meeting with students in the Sumy Oblast. A sincere conversation with students studying in Sumy Oblast. We will certainly do everything to ensure that Ukraine lives, that young people have the opportunity to live and develop in Ukraine. He's investing in the future, even as he's trying to take care of today. And that's my thoughts on President Zelensky's visits to the front lines at this point. The news out of Ukraine itself, not vast. There are a few things going on, and of course, plenty of attacks and things like that, some of which we'll get into a little bit later. But I wanted to share this video real quick. Let's see, hit that, and put the volume down here. There we go. That should do it. We'll start here. Pause here for a second here. Koma the chinchilla was also a victim of the Russian attack on Kiev. Her owner says she did not have time to run out of the house before the explosion. Then she grabbed Koma and ran outside. I'm sorry I'm crying, but it's terrible, she says. I thought it wouldn't hit us, but it did. Everything went dark. Windows and glass were blown out. It's terrible. Now we have no windows. The air alert sounded and an explosion was heard immediately. People did not have time to hide. Thank God I am alive. I found Koma. Now Koma and I don't know what to do. Maybe someone will help us, maybe not. It's hard to see in the eyes there that the pain, the sadness, the confusion, the sorrow. Losing pretty much everything. But at least they saved Koma the chinchilla. Let's move on to news out of Russia, and there is a lot going on in Russia. We'll briefly stop with the Institute for the Study of War, who talks about the Belarusian president's comments on the Crocus City Hall attackers, saying that he actually said they originally fled towards Belarus, not Ukraine, which pretty much undermined the Kremlin narrative on Ukraine's involvement. And this whole situation over there gets increasingly murky as the days go by. There could be FSB involvement. There could not be. There could be, there could be entirely ISIS's deal. We just don't know, and I doubt we'll ever know, at least in the immediate future here. In the end, though, it's clear that these men were hired for what should have been a suicide trip and thought they'd get away to get money. Not the brightest bulbs on that one. And the end result is still that Russia is still trying to blame Ukraine for all of it, because that would give them more reason to rally their people against Ukraine. It's that simple. Russian investigators even went to Tajikistan on March 26 to question the families of the suspects of the Crocus City Hall terrorist attack. Looks like this is a series of interviews, and that the family said they couldn't believe the men would have been motivated by extremist Islamic beliefs. Might be something simpler than that. ISIS may have just paid them. That simple. The Samsung Pay system will stop working with Russian mirror cards as of the beginning of April. This is more of the increasing isolation of the Russian financial systems as they go along. And the more isolated they become, the harder it's going to be for them to be able to work on anything in the world stage. Brief pause here. I'm going to quickly read through the comments here. Tony says, as a veteran, I can't believe we are not sending more help to Ukraine. If I was 20 years younger, I would definitely be there already, I swear. And some definite positive remarks about that. As Tony then said, it's so terrible, shame on our politicians. Ozzy says, the USA needs good people like you, Tony, to stand for office. I'll tell you, Ozzy, I looked into what it would take to stand for office here in my state. And really, it's not that it's hard to do. It's that the situation in my state would make it impossible for me to win in this case, in my opinion. Not without hiding who I really am. A true conservative, peace through strength person. I don't think I could win. At least that's my opinion, and I looked into it pretty closely for a little while. I could run for some local office instead, but that would not have any effect on the overall situation, either in the United States or in Ukraine. Moving on, Russian forces in occupied Crimea are constructing barriers at the entrance to Sevastopol Bay to prevent further Ukrainian strikes on the Black Sea Fleet. Going to point out that the last several rounds of strikes have been with missiles and drones, not with the sea babies and the nautical drones that they've been using. So more barriers there, not going to stop anything. Now go ahead and check out this video right here. This is in Nizhny Tagil. You can see here, all of a sudden this tank comes out of the side, hits the brakes, still smashes into the side of the car. Thankfully, it looks like a relatively minor, not sure if you'd call this a fender bender, though that car certainly had its fender bent by a rather large person driving along. Russia has been trying to produce their own processors. Bal Electronics have ordered the production of chips and packaging, but they're having failure rates of up to 50% of the chips they're producing. This is because of lack of experience and poor quality older equipment. Interesting to see that they are not able to produce at scale the chips necessary for their own equipment overall. And it looks like there are certain parts of the sanctions that are working. Obviously, though, they're still finding ways around it. An explosion was heard in Belgrad over at the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The roads blocked, ambulances were at the scene. I did see somebody say that one person was injured in this attack. No further information really beyond it being a drone attack. There was an indication, we've seen several, in fact, recently, that Zircon hypersonic missiles by the Russian Federation have been used in Ukraine multiple times recently. And the Ukrainians are theorizing this might indicate a shortage of other types of missiles. They launched these missiles from Crimea. That's their base for these Zircon hypersonic missiles. But they wouldn't use these unless they had no other effective option in play. And that's what's interesting, at least from our perspective here. Russia may be, I'm not going to claim that they're running out of missiles because it's been clear that prediction has never panned out. But if they're launching these high-end missiles into an environment like this, it means that they are likely having trouble procuring chips and equipment to be able to build more of their own regular missiles. The birth rate in Russia has dropped as of 2023 to 1.41. This is well below replacement level, which is 2.1 children per family. The overall thought, at least my initial thought, of course, was that people don't like to give birth of children into places that aren't happy or healthy or prospering. And that's the reason why you're seeing that happen, that birth rate drop like that. I mean, it did peak around 1.78 back in 2015, but overall you can see that they are not maintaining replacement rate over in Russia. Russian propagandists are claiming they're unhappy with the West for not helping with the aftermath of the terrorist attack on Crocus City Hall. I'm going to point out that multiple nations have offered to send teams to assist in the investigation, have offered to take on investigative aspects, to provide intelligence and information. But the Russians have stated outright, no, we don't want it. So it's all on them that they aren't receiving this type of information, this type of help. And this is just the typical Russian way. Now they're saying, oh, it's all the West's fault we're not getting this help. No, maybe you should have said yes. A Russian propagandist also said, while he was an MP, claimed that Russia has common geopolitical interests with ISIS and even supports it. And as he said this, the host was immediately like, cut to a commercial. We got to, no, get that off the air. Seems like that at least somebody said the quiet part out loud. Relatives of Russian convicts who were used in the meat assaults are asking why their family members are not insured despite there being orders by the Ministry of Defense and government. These guys are not getting paid for their injuries or deaths, and they're saying, why aren't you doing what you promised? And this is, I believe this is the Wildberries warehouse over in Moscow. After the ISIS attacks on the Crocus City Music Hall, they apparently the word we have, at least at this point in time, and I'm going to state that this has minimal effective confirmation. I've got one solid source and a couple others talking similarly, stating that there was to be widespread crackdowns on Muslims in Moscow and the European parts of Russia. So they did an anti-migrant police raid in over at the Wildberries warehouse, and my understanding is they arrested about 40 people during that raid. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the international news. It's a little bit light today, which I'm not complaining too much about a light day overall. So let's go ahead and get into this. Poland has doubled its contribution to the Czech Ammunition Initiative for Kyiv. They don't say what that exact number is, and I don't remember what they originally pledged, but more nations are providing even more to get the artillery to the front lines. I did see something, and again, this is one of those things where I don't have good confirmation, but the source in this case is typically pretty reliable. That said that the initial artillery is starting to show up at the front lines. Now, is that true? Maybe not. It could be that Ukraine is pulling out the stuff they've reserved and sending it to the front lines to be used in anticipation of receiving the Czech initiative ammunition. But there's a possibility that there may already be the initial effects of that Czech initiative showing up on the front lines. Russia is facing delays in oil payments from China, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. These banks are saying, oh, no, we got to deal with the sanctions, time out. Oh, no, if you get your money, it's going to take a long flipping time. So there's some of them have said they're rejecting these transfers entirely. And so the overall situation is that Russia's got a complicated financial situation going on. The U.S. and South Korea have held their first joint meeting on March 26. They're forming a new task force that talks about combating the illegal import of oil to North Korea. They've been cut off from oil overall for quite some time. Obviously, they've been working their way around that anyway. And with Russia now saying that they're sending oil directly to North Korea, there's going to be a lot of work to try and stop that from happening. Hungarians have been protesting against Viktor Orban because of a corruption leak scandal. Thousands of people rallied last night, I believe it is now, since today's the 27th, calling for the resignation of Viktor Orban and his chief prosecutor. So things are getting tense over there. And Orban is a major ally for Russia overall, though my gut feel on Orban in the end is that Orban cares about Orban. And he thinks if he plays along with Putin's tune for long enough, he can get more power and money for Orban. Slovenia is even putting in money for the Czech Ammunition Initiative. They don't say anywhere exactly how much they're putting in, but again, countries are really putting in the money for this. They recognize at this point that there may not be help coming anytime soon from the United States. The European Union has allocated more than 130 million euros to Germany's arm manufacturer Rheinmetall to increase ammunition production. This is a vital piece right here. Rheinmetall is a major arms manufacturer, making everything from tanks to ammunition. And they're trying to expand into Ukraine. They're trying to expand their facilities in Germany. And either way, they're going to need more capital investment in order to be able to do so. So Latvia, let's talk about Latvia for a moment here. They charged the affairs of the Russian embassy, Oleg Zykov, has been advised that he is no longer welcome in Latvia because he has expressed a categorical protest from the Latvian side regarding the unacceptable, the Latvians said they have a categorical protest regarding the unacceptable and provocative public communications conducted by the Russian embassy for a long time. Of course, Russia said, we'll answer, and that's fine. But the truth is that there should be very few Russian embassies open with their diplomats inside. Not at this point in time. 39 Nobel laureates, this is from The Insider, signed an open letter to world leaders. They are asking for support to Ukraine and not to recognize Vladimir Putin's latest election. Let's see, this letter right here, they summarized the whole thing pretty well here. The full-scale aggression against Ukraine and the murder of Alexei Navalny is taking the threat to a new level, since the Putin regime no longer sees any restrictions on its violation of human rights and international norms. The horrors of the world wars of the 20th century remind us that humanity can only avoid self-destruction if it adheres to the principles of democracy and international human rights law. The Putin regime cynically trampled them. The tragedies of totalitarianism call for respect for the freedom and dignity of the individual. Putin is openly mocking them. He has turned Russia into an extremely militarized police state with the largest nuclear arsenal, posing a threat to the very existence of the world. Here's their 5 points that they were summarizing here. Significantly increase aid to Ukraine, support human rights and the Democrat opposition in Russia, strengthen support for Russian citizens who are at risk of reprisals because of their democratic and anti-war political beliefs and who need refuge. Support Russian democratic anti-Putin organizations, including independent Russian media, whose role in regime change is critical, and delegitimize Putin's illegitimate hold on power in Russia, who is desperately seeking recognition from the world community. Quite the interesting letter that these 39 Nobel laureates put out. And engineers had evolved an Dynamics, that is correct. Evolved Dynamics in southern England are developing technology to counter Russia's electronic warfare capabilities. The idea is to be able to counter the whole jamming situation that they've got going on the front lines and allow Ukrainian drones to be able to effectively operate even in a harsh electronic warfare environment. Now, there's a lot of technologies that are already well known and well understood that might assist with that: frequency hopping, time division multiplexing, and a few other things that would allow these drones to potentially get a move outside of the range of jamming. The problem is that you want something that's going to work for the long term, and that means a flexible radio system that will be able to work at a variety of frequencies and spectrums that allow it to operate even in these harsh environments, and be able to avoid it by moving to different frequencies outside of the jammed range. It's going to be a tough one for them to do, and that makes the equipment more expensive. But at this point, it looks like Ukraine's going to need that technology, and fast. We're going to move on to the front lines here pretty quick. Now, there has been no update to the deep state map here. Nothing interesting there. And then there is, the thing is, there are some changes, but they were reported by null reports, which we'll get to in a bit. From the Defense Intelligence of the United Kingdom, on the 20th of March, 2024, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced the formation of the Dnipro River Flotilla and a boat brigade. This new formation will likely be responsible for securing the Dnipro waterways and islands that separate Russian and Ukrainian-controlled Kherson. It is a realistic possibility the Dnipro flotilla will be subordinate to the Dnipro Group of Forces, which combined the Zaporizhia and Dnipro Group of Forces in February 2024. Overall, the idea is deny Ukrainians the ability to cross the river. They've been supporting this beachhead over in Kharkiv for quite some time now. They've been supporting a beachhead over near the Antonovsky Bridge, and they're continuing to work on those areas, although the situation overall has remained relatively static. By the way, on this one real quick, I did watch a video of it was a kind of a rubber inflatable raft being paddled by Russians getting blown up by Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians are already well aware, and I'm not sure the Russians are quite prepared for the consequences of a whole bunch of Ukrainians with anti-tank missiles and drones. This came in earlier today. Russia once again struck Kharkiv with some 500-kilogram bombs. This is pretty much constant air raids on Kharkiv. They're trying to destroy the city and render it basically uninhabitable. At this point, they've already destroyed the electrical infrastructure leading into the town, and my understanding is that power is being basically routed into the area from other sources. Belgrad is not free of the suffering that's associated with this war. There were several, they call them arrivals, and there were several fires started with cars burning in the streets. No casualties reported there. I've got to pause this one because this entire building gets blown up, but this Russian command post building was destroyed, believed by JDAMs or possibly AASMs on the left bank of the Kherson region. I suspect, I know I've said this multiple times before, I'm still watching the Dnipro River and the Kherson region very closely, and it seems like something could break really soon. But that said, I've said that for a while, so take it with that grain of salt. On the Tindra Spit, on the occupied left bank of the Kherson region, Ukrainian armed forces destroyed a large hangar filled with ammunition. Another ammunition dump got blown up, basically. From the battles for Kosinka, this is still ongoing. Kosinka is across the border in Belgrad Oblast over in Russia. And the Russians have basically been leveling the entire village, trying to destroy and get rid of the Ukrainian-supported Russian volunteer corps that are fighting in the area. But the overall intensity of fighting has apparently decreased in the area, and the Russian volunteer corps is still there. Interesting to see, and it really indicates how stretched thin much of Russia's military is. Hi, Lucille. Glad to have you on board. We're getting towards the end of things here, so you might want to go back and rewatch. Obviously, wait till things are done, obviously. And do appreciate you being here. Russia has continued to take small bits of Novomykhailivka. This is an ongoing situation, slower than it was. They were taking a considerable amount more about last week and the week before. So it looks like the steam is running out of their assaults right now. We'll be watching this, though. They are still gaining ground in the area, though, in small doses. Same thing with the Klishivka area. The Russians have managed to make some progress in small forest strips and open areas. And Avdiivka itself has remained stable recently, with the Russians attempting to penetrate the line west of Orlivka, where they've been trying to break through. Lots of infantry losses, but this is going to be another situation where it's going to be beating, throwing bodies at the wall and seeing if they can get through and knock it down. And that's the situation on the front lines. I mean, pretty straightforward once again. So we'll move on to the interesting extras. But before I do, let's go ahead and go through the comments real fast. Tony says, "Oh, thank you very much, Tony. I don't need to read that out loud, but I appreciate the thumbs up on all that." And Tony adds that he lives in Connecticut, and most people really care about helping others. A little expensive, but it's well worth it. A lot of care for each other. That's one of the things that is wonderful about America. And we need more of that all the way through. Hi, Jerry. Glad to have you on board as well. We're going into the interesting extras here, so we're right at the very end. So you might want to watch it from the beginning in just a few minutes here after we get done. Over at Moscow's Domodedovo airport, a water truck rammed into and disabled the world's largest passenger plane, an Emirates Airbus A380. This would be humorous, except for I did a little bit more research in the situation, and it turns out that the driver had a stroke while he was driving the water truck, and that's what caused it to crash into the airplane. They did rush him to the hospital, and he is in serious condition as of this publication. And just in case you think that the other dictators in the world are not paying attention and that nothing happening in Ukraine will make any difference at all, here's a Chinese military training site in China's Inner Mongolia region. It's an exact replica of the road network near Taiwan's presidential palace. China really wants to invade Taiwan, and that will truly unbalance the entire region. It will unbalance it in more ways than one. You see, Taiwan is still the largest manufacturer of semiconductors in the world, and I do mean world. They do some humongous percentage, and I'm not talking 20, I'm talking like 60 or 70% as I recall. And that's, the U.S. might be a research superpower when it comes to these types of chips and things, but when it comes to manufacturing, nobody is beating Taiwan, period. So if China can take Taiwan, they can put a tight squeeze on the world chip market and prevent people like the United States from getting chips. These dictators are paying attention. They're watching everything that happens in Ukraine. They're watching everything that happens over in Israel, and they're definitely watching what's going on with the Houthis over in the Red Sea. And each time we don't decisively respond, we encourage them to take their next step. Iran, North Korea, China, and Russia. And we're going to end off with this just super cute video. I think it's got some music on it, so I'm going to mute that part. This is from Defense of Ukraine. There is an old wisdom that says that a cat in a mortar team boosts the accuracy of every shot. So you'll see this crew working, and they're playing with their cat at the same time. I don't know what it's written on the shell, but either way, I'm always just amazed at how much the Ukrainians love their animals. and take good care of them, even when they're in the middle of a fire mission to put mortars on target. And that's everything for today. I thought I'd end it with a cute little cat. I know I've already pontificated extensively on the situation in the world, in the U.S., and I think that's good enough for today. All of you, thank you for all the comments. I really appreciate it. I do want to let you know that about the changing circumstances I'm going through right now. With the reduction in the amount of work I've been doing for other channels, it's meant I'm going to be looking for steady work over here where I live. And so that will probably result in either shorter live streams or maybe every other day or something like that. I don't know what the impact will be because I am still searching for work. So just be advised that that might be coming along down the pike. But as always, I absolutely appreciate every single one of you. In fact, let me get the camera up here. I do absolutely appreciate every single one of you and for the wonderful information you bring to our community, to all of us, and helping us to understand the world around us even better by the end of these live streams. So once again, thank you for joining me today. You have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on the next video.